you fat piece of bacon!
Don't be scared of someone. Directed by William Instone and Matt Rifley, we are talking Butchers Bluff. Instone actually wrote the movie as well. Now, this is a slasher film that is a modern movie, but it has the sensibilities of an 80s slasher, or at least that was the intention by the filmmakers here. So what's the story? It focuses on a group of kind of university age teens, young adults, as they want to do a project, or one of them wants to do a project on this kind of urban legend of the Hogman, kind of a Bigfoot style legend of this kind of like small out the way American town. So we get a group of these kind of people, some of which want to go and do this investigation, some of which are just there to kind of like tag along and have a little bit of fun on the way. They go to the this kind of small town and warned off by the locals, and inevitably they come across this this killer, this masked killer, the Hogman, who obviously isn't too friendly. What'll happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So let's discuss. It's got a couple of familiar genre faces here that pop up in small roles. Brinky Stevens, Bill Oberus Jr., for example. So there is a couple of recognisable names here for, the recognisable character actors, so to speak. So this movie is very much in the mould of a stereotypical kind of slasher to a large degree. Now, that might in itself sound like a negative, but I think this movie is definitely just trying to play to fans of this genre and kind of hit all those marks that people would expect to see. So if you're a fan, and I know there are plenty of these kind of masked, slasher style movies, then I think this movie definitely caters for that audience, because I think it has all of the kind of the elements that people would like. And we'll kind of come on to a few more, a bit more detail about that. But I think it actually has a little extra in some respects. And what do I mean by that? Okay, so as with a lot of these films, we get a group of characters who range from different types of personalities. We've got the stoners, we've got the slutty girl, we've got the pragmatic girl, for example, we've got the kind of like the douchey kind of jock sort of style character. They are here, but what I will say is I think the filmmakers have made them mentally a little bit more mature than some. So, for example, some of the kind of like the way that I would say this movie, I think, to me at least, elevates some of the more cliched elements, is that it doesn't necessarily fall down in some of the cliches, despite being cliches in others. So when they inevitably come across Bill Oberust's character, who is this kind of guy who warns them not to go in the woods, the local kind of weird guy who sort of says, don't go in these woods, kids. In a lot of these films there, we got our city characters, they're rude to the locals. They're not really, they're actually kind of quite friendly and try to be quite respectful. And I thought, I kind of quite like that. I mean, they're a little bit behind closed doors going, oh, look at that, who's that weird guy? But to these kind of characters, to these locals, the sheriff, this kind of like shop owner guy, they're actually quite friendly and sort of personable and actually trying to, be genuinely interested in what they've got to say. I mean, ultimately, the reason why they're there is for these sort of characters to do this sort of documentary, make this film, so they want to talk to these guys, they want to get them on side, so it makes sense. It's actually kind of quite refreshing to see characters, I think, act somewhat kind of more normally, and, university students trying to do their project, and not just it be an excuse to go out and party. I mean, there is that. some of these characters are there for that purpose, but they are there specifically for that purpose. It's not like they're there to do really part of this project. They just tag along. So I kind of quite liked some of the character work here, and despite it being an array of characters, types that we've seen before, the way they act is just a little bit sort of, more mature in some ways. I mean, some are better than others. Our two slutty girls that we get don't really get much of a kind of character building to this, and they are nothing more than just the kind of the slutty girls. But you know, they're never kind of like super mean or anything like that, I thought. So again, even with those, I thought they were, there was some kind of improvements to a lot of what you've seen. And, you know, some character types are missing altogether. And normally these films, you're going to get the good girl who's a sort of like, she's normally got some tragic backstory that she's trying to get over some loss of her parents or something like that. And she's all sad. There is a kind of a good girl, but she's just much more of a pragmatist than anything else. She's just there to kind of get a job, and there's no like, you know, love drama and all that sort of going on. So I kind of quite liked a slightly more mature element here to our sort of characters. And then it leads me to the second part, still about the characters, that they actually have quite distinctive personalities to a degree, and you actually kind of quite like them, or the majority of them, I think, and you actually kind of get out, you know, you are sad when inevitably some end up coming croppers. So I think they did a good job of established sort of real characters that you can kind of somewhat kind of root behind. The other thing, and this is going to be a negative as well, to be fair, but the movie never really has a main character, or you never really focus on one of these characters in particular. And as such, you're not quite sure who's going to kind of end up getting killed and who isn't, because you never really feel like the movie is following one particular kind of character, and as such, everyone is kind of fair game to a degree. So it's much more of an ensemble in that respect. So that was, again, it's a bit of a double-edged sword, and we'll come back onto that. But I do think it gives it a little bit of kind of unpredictability in the, you know, in the killings, so to speak. And let's talk about these killings. So there was great care taken to give us some kind of quite gory shots and practical kind of like VFX and kills and things like that. Although I wouldn't say this is anywhere near like the Terrify kind of levels of gore and stuff. A couple of sort of gore shots that we do see, you know, I think are very well done, look gruesome, look bloody, and they're all kind of practically realised. Again, this is this ethos of trying to emulate the kind of the style of the 80s movies and try and stay away from the kind of the more sort of CGI blood splatter and stuff like that that sort of permeates so many kind of modern horror movies at this point. So that was, that was interesting. Let's talk about the killer itself. I actually do think they've painted the killer to be somewhat of a sympathetic figure. A result of some tragic upbringing. I mean, this isn't new. This has sort of been done before. It does kind of follow the Jason Voorhees sort of style. You know, he was bullied and ended up kind of like coming back as a sort of a warped killer and things. But nonetheless, there is still a degree of empathy, at the very least, you can think for, you know, what this sort of character has kind of gone through and what has led him to become this kind of killer. And there's also an element here of a little bit of a wider conspiracy and things about what's actually kind of gone on and who's involved, and, you know, is this thing maybe larger than you initially anticipate. So I kind of quite like the fact that this almost expands upon the kind of the lore, so to speak. So yeah, I mean, and really, again, just to reiterate, I do think if you're a slasher fan, this very much is catering to this audience, and I think it does it to a good quality. Everything here, I think, is to a reasonable or at least or good quality in regards to its kind of production and the way it's shot and things like that. I think it is quite sort of well done. And it's obviously been a film which has had a degree of care and attention. This is not a film which has been, you know, shot over a weekend, for example, like some of these kind of like low budget slasher films that I review here. This feels like it has a little bit more attention to it and a little bit more care put into it than I say most. Let's talk about what doesn't work, and let's talk about that ensemble casting. I think maybe the fact that you don't have a kind of lead character, so to speak, you don't quite follow anyone's particular path, so you're not quite sure who to kind of root for to a degree, because you know some of these people are going to get killed. And I think there is just a little bit of disconnect to a degree where you don't have a central protagonist, so to speak. It's a minor point, I actually think in some aspects it does work in its movie's favour, but maybe you kind of care a little bit less because you're not following a particular point of view or anything like that. Maybe the issue, the biggest issue for me with this film is the pacing. I think is just a little bit slow. The movie's reasonably long. It's about, for a slasher film, it's about, it's 2 hours. I didn't think it needed to be necessarily that long, and there are elements here where I just feel it just is a little bit slow at times. And in some sequences, I know this movie wants to have, a reasonable amount of kills. So we're introduced to a plethora of kind of, day players, so to speak, small characters that come in, get killed, and they're just there to rack up the body count rather than our central characters. But I think, to me, I thought we spent a little bit too much time with some of these kind of lesser characters, so to speak, because we know that they're just there for cannon fodder, and it felt like that sometimes the movie's pacing was just a little bit too slow. And you kind of, okay, let's kind of, we know that these people are just there for cannon fodder. Let's get on with it. We don't really need sort of, 5-10 minutes of screen time for them preceding that and stuff like that. So there are some pacing issues, and I think the decision here to have our group of protagonists come to face with this creature or this character towards the end of the movie, right at the end. Again, it feels like it's a good payoff, maybe, but the pacing is a little slow because of it. Because we don't really, these guys don't really know this entity exists until really at the end of the movie. The movie definitely feels like it's setting up a sequel, and there are some elements here. Now, this point might be fine if there is a sequel. But there are some elements here that I think are introduced right at the end, including this kind of police officer, that I think are quite interesting. And actually, that's an interesting story thread that's a little bit different from, a typical slasher film. I don't say what, and then it's kind of like, it doesn't end up going anywhere. Now, I presume this is because it's a sequel, but if there isn't a sequel to this, then that feels like a missed opportunity. So that's going to depend really where this film sort of goes. That's the kind of the long and skinny of this one. I think, genuinely speaking, it's actually kind of quite a good movie. There are a couple of actors here who I don't think do a particularly strong job. I would say most are fine, but some of these kind of like these characters, this group of young people, there are a couple of weaker links there, and I will say that. I won't point out who, but because their screen time is relatively equal, maybe they stand out more than had there been more of a sort of central character. Now, how to rank this movie? I had to say I was kind of going between a 6 and a 7 with this one. It's definitely an above average film, I would say, for what it's trying to do. I'm going to go with this 6. I don't think it's quite there to get a 7, to be honest, for me at least. But I do think it's an above average film. So if you are a slasher fan, I would highly recommend this. I don't think it kind of quite breaks the mold as much as it could have. But yeah, it's definitely a solid movie, worth checking out if you're a slasher fan. 6 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.